everybody, from whenever, wherever you may be watching. This is The Yard Sign, the most important and relevant podcast in politics. I'm your host, as always, Jonny Torres. Thank you so much for watching. We've got a packed show for you today. Lots of news in a full slate. And so let's jump right into today's topics. We have a $3 trillion bailout that passes the House. We're going to see how much ice cream that can buy at Pelosi's house. Was Cuomo's COVID policy the worst in the nation? We're going to pick apart what is the largest outbreak of the coronavirus in the country, and Obama speaks out, not only in this commencement, but he's also starting to come out against the president now that he's getting more involved in this election. In California, will we see a red California in November? We're also going to deconstruct that along with these guys here. It's the usual crew back together for today's show. Over here to my right, left, I can never get this right. Anibal Cabrera right next to me. In the bottom corner, we've got Chris Verkuilen and Jake Hoffman, as always. What's up, fellas?
How's it going?
How's it going, Jonny?
What's up?
I swear, I feel like we haven't seen each other in, I don't know, a year. This week just seemed really, really long for me anyways. But I'm excited. There's obviously some coronavirus stuff and some non-coronavirus stuff to talk about. So let's dive right into what's easily, I would say, the biggest news of the day. The House trying to pass a $3 trillion bailout. And as expected, coming from Nancy Pelosi, it's a hot mess. Everybody on the Senate side in the executive branch has already said it's dead on arrival. Where do we even start, picking apart this beast of a bill that Pelosi's trying to get out?
Well, I can tell you one thing, Jonny, that it is what we've been warning about on this show for 3 months now at this point. What we've been saying is that the things that come out of coronavirus, the response that comes out of Washington, we need to make sure that it's not permanent. And this type of bill is Nancy Pelosi's way of, in the Democrats and the leftists and all the socialists that are over on that side are trying to push towards the country. Again, it's a Christmas list, right? It's a wish list of a bunch of Democratic policies that they wanted implemented before coronavirus, and they're using coronavirus as an excuse to push unemployment all the way to January, to get rid of student loan debt, to do all of these different things that are not ultimately good for the country, but again have been Democratic wish lists for a long time. So it's a way of starting to get Americans used to being reliant on welfare, reliant on government, and again it slowly seeps into UBI and those type of conversations that we've been trying to advocate against on this show for a long time. So that's what this is ultimately. Again, like you said, it's not going to pass, but there's a whole lot in there that you can get mad about. That's for sure.
Yeah, Anibal, I know that. I'm sorry, I was just going to actually come to you. I know you follow the numbers really closely on stuff like this. What's kind of the most audacious part of this? I'm hearing bailouts for California and some of these other states that have obviously, they've never balanced their budget to begin with, although they claim to have balanced budget amendments.
The numbers are astronomical when it comes to wanting to bail out the states, wanting to bail out lobbying groups, wanting to bail out payday lenders, all those kind of organizations that were not allowed to participate in the first 2 or maybe now 3 rounds of stimulus are really trying to get a handle on this situation. So you can really see where Nancy Pelosi and the Democrats are getting their money from and their donors. And it's these large organizations that are trying to get money out of them. The SALT tax, which is just a way to take states' rights away from taxing their individual rich citizens, to just an immense amount of additional stimulus packaging. The pork is heavy on this stimulus package, and I don't think it's going to happen.
Well, they're absolutely. Again, if anyone knows how to take advantage of a crisis, it's certainly the Democrats. And, we saw Nancy Pelosi, put in some favors there in this last stimulus bill, where she gave the Kennedy Center a whole bunch of money, and that obviously became a huge news item. And all along the way, we see California giving money to illegal immigrants. Chris, as we see, this is obviously, they knew this wasn't going to. This to me is always that warning shot, right?
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be the actual bill here, Chris? And where do you see them getting away with some stuff?
So yeah, Johnny, the idea that Congress and the House are holding aid to the people hostage because they have a coronavirus to justify what they're spending, and the fact that they're using that as a means by which to get people to urge the legislature to spend this money is really reprehensible. Like, first of all, you're doing this wrong. You're making people have the need in the first place by keeping everything shut down. And let's just be honest, Democrats are keeping everything shut down, and their cohorts in the state and local governments are making this need not a necessity. So the idea is...
Yeah, I get what you're saying, Chris, is that this is something that they're holding up the entire country based off of, this is supposed to be about a virus, remember? Like, if you guys can remember what this is actually supposed to be about, this is a bill that has nothing to do with coronavirus, and any of it that is still in there is self-inflicted wounds, right? So if you look past that and you look at the sheer numbers, like Anibal was starting to allude to, you're looking at possibly running a $6 or $7 trillion deficit this year. That's insane, right? Like,
just
this isn't like
year too.
Just this year. We already to try and put that into perspective is not even possible. The numbers are so big, and that's why people look at this like, well, the government can just keep spending money. The government, like, these numbers are so astronomical that people can't wrap their heads around them, and so they think that it just falls from the sky, because right now it is kind of just falling from the sky to them, and that's what's going on. And then you have somebody like Nancy Pelosi and these Democrats trying to push this giant program onto us, and it doesn't even really get to the crux of the issue. And I was explaining this to a lot of people. Business owners, they got theirs in the PPP loans, but a lot of those businesses didn't shut down. That's one of the things we talked about with like Harvard getting it, and Shake Shack, and all these people who didn't really need it all that much. They had the means at the end of the day to keep going, and they're okay. The average American getting $1,200, like, that's great. I think that's important. But when you start to look at it, the money is just thrown at everybody, right? There's no careful thought and strategy into what they're doing. If you told me you're going to put $1 trillion injected into the economy because you're going to give it to hospitality specifically, or you have to prove that your business went out of business for a couple of months, or all those types of things, you would probably drop the cost of this significantly down, and also hyper target what you are trying to do and really address the problem at hand. Right now, we're not addressing the problem at hand. We're just printing money and throwing it, and just money printer go brr, all of it, that's all that's happening over and over again, and there's really nothing to there's nothing measurable happening right now. They think that just printing money is going to solve the problem.
Well, and again, to kind of use it as a metaphor, I mean, they're basically trying to, we're basically riding the Titanic, and they're trying to bucket out all the water, that's coming into the boat. Meanwhile, Democrats are not only trying to dump the water out of the boat, but at the same time, they're making the hole bigger, on the back end, because, trust me when I tell you that they're going to use this as ammunition against the president, and saying, look at how much debt he's gotten us into, the same way that they're already building the narrative that look at all the people that have died, under President Trump, because of this virus. And so they're here basically doing double-handed work, because they know that they're not going to get any type of a pushback, and they're not going to have to take any responsibility for this spending.
To speak about not getting any pushback, there is a billboard in Times Square that has a death count that is Trump's responsibility. It says Trump's death count due to inaction. I mean, insane, just absolutely insane. They're not going to get any pushback, but go ahead, Anibal, DJ Decab.
So I think what really is happening here is that Nancy never expected this bill to pass whatsoever out of the Senate, and let alone it going to the president's desk. And the reason why she did this, and the reason why it's full of pork and research for a woman-based marijuana facilities, and making sure that there's a minority female on every single executive board that takes money, is that they're trying to build a narrative of what their 2020 agenda is going to look like. And one, this is coming from the wrong person. It should really be coming from Joe Biden and his push for it, but no one knows what bunker he's in today. And then two, you see that she is completely held by the extreme left, by the AOCs of the world, that they're just pushing the narrative, and it's pissing people off. Because again, yes, we're going to be at like $2 or $3 trillion already after everything is said and done, not including this particular package. But the goal for some people is to print as much money as possible because they don't think it's going to cause irreparable damage. And the problem is that you cannot get people to continue to push and say yes to this, because eventually you will get the Ron Pauls of the world saying that the deficit hawks that are not going to let us continue moving this forward. But if you go into the nitty gritty of what's in the bill, it's laughable of the thing that they're asking for people to do.
So a couple more points on that topic. So I really don't like that the money flow is making people not have to make hard decisions, not having to analyze what measures do we take as far as keeping closed down, as opposed to how much money is this going to cost. And I've gone back to this weeks and months ago. People do not understand what money comes from, how goods are produced, and how that results in our lives being better or worse. And the long-reaching effects of that can result, we're not going to be able to, like I said before, we're not going to be able to help the third world countries anymore. We're going to have deaths in third world countries because we're not helping them anymore. The other
Elon Musk said that if you don't make stuff, you don't have stuff, and that is the crux of the
economy.
Absolutely.
It's frustrating. It's very frustrating to see what's happening.
Trying to explain the idea of how the economy works to solve this coronavirus debate, or to have a say that it's an important part of this, is ridiculous. I have to go through 4 years of college in order to educate someone why we should not have the coronavirus lockdown indefinitely until we have got a vaccine. And that's what it's become.
Well, that's again, not what we were promised.
Well, and we've never been through this, right? And so I think there's a lot of learned lessons here. And honestly, as we're starting to see, people are realizing that when it comes to the larger states, you're looking at what Texas has done and what we've done here in Florida, and you compare that to California and New York, and you're seeing a very different type of leadership that has obviously been very effective in this kind of situation. And now we know, if this thing ever happens again, that you don't have to shut down the entire economy. There are best practices and guidelines that you can put in place for businesses to remain open. And I think that's the biggest lesson to come out of here. But the truth of the matter is that, to transition into our next point, is how contrasting the leadership has been, let's say, between New York and Florida, and the repercussions of that. And of course, people want to, defend Cuomo and say, well, it's the density in New York City and the surrounding areas that have led to those astronomical numbers.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is, even if you can look at very specific things like not shutting down the subway earlier. I mean, he literally took 2 months.
He still hasn't shut down the subway. It's never shut down.
He won't shut it down.
And then, of course, the biggest thing that's going to come back to haunt him are the number of deaths in the nursing homes, and how he exacerbated that problem by forcing nursing homes to admit people, and today coming out and saying, well, no one should be prosecuted for the deaths that occurred in nursing homes. Well, yeah, you created that problem. You created that mess. And if anybody should be prosecuted, it's Governor Cuomo.
That's the whole.
Well, that's the
whole point of our entire system, is the federalistic aspect of it. We have the individual states that are able to make and produce laws so that we can see what works in those states and what doesn't. A great example, and that we've already been kind of talking about it, is the nursing home situation. It was New York, New Jersey, and California that required nursing patients that were coming out of nursing homes, that were in the hospitals, and that they were stabilized to go back to the nursing homes. And that caused a cascade of events that caused even more deaths and hospitalizations. Now, New Jersey and California cut that out in mid-April, but you now have New York only now stopping that and what happened there. And that shows a really lack of understanding of what was going on. He was asking for ventilators he didn't need. He was asking for a hospital ship that he didn't need and he didn't use. And that's why he looks shiny, the media likes him and everything else. But history will show that he was one of the worst governors in the United States during this pandemic that was not willing to shift or show that he was wrong.
Well, Anibal, and that's really the problem, though, to go to Johnny's original point about learning a lesson. I don't think that we're going to learn a lesson. That's really the problem here, is that if you look at how the media is reported it, I mean, they're still reporting, people want Andrew Cuomo to run for governor or for president because of the way that he's handled this entire thing. And like you guys have said, he's had some of the worst numbers. New York is the epicenter due to the policies that city and that state has taken. Right, it's so poorly managed that is solely for the reason that they have to blame. Yes, density has something to do with it, but at the end of the day, you're not seeing the same type of spikes in LA or in DC or San Francisco and all those other places, even as bad as they are. Now, when you take all of those things, again, are we going to actually learn from them? I don't think so. But if you were to learn from them, you would do something very similar to what Florida Governor Ron DeSantis did, which is you do not force people to go back to nursing homes. You actually focus on, okay, where are the sick people? What can we do with them? Can we quarantine them, put them into different nursing homes, something like that? These are all the questions that should have been asked 2 months ago before we shut down the entire economy. We didn't shut down the entire economy. We didn't evaluate it in a critical manner. So we just shut down the entire economy. We did these sweeping regulations. And again, they don't work. The effect on our economy is going to be, probably felt for a decade, if not longer. And instead, we could probably put together an entire checklist now afterwards of saying, like, here's how you do it. Here's how you handle it. But are we going to do that? Probably not. I would assume the media is going to keep. I think the media is going to keep telling people that. I mean, look at what's going on right now. Even as we all sit here, reasonable human beings, saying, here's how we could not only solve this in the future, but right now, look, you just if you just focus solely on nursing homes, focus on the sick, and then you let other people go back to work and you do social distancing, all those things, like that's too reasonable for everybody. Right now, the only conversation that's happening is LA saying we're going to be shut down until there's a cure. People in liberal cities talking, in the media talking about, like, we're not going to do anything until there's a vaccine available. And like, it's unrealistic stuff. And
but that's freaking people out. I want them to go that extreme, because you need that kind of difference of show of what's happening. Again, right now, yes, the media looks like it's always going to be on one side. 6 months from now, we're going to have an election, and it's going to be a completely different world. And the only way Democrats and even Republicans learn their lessons is when they lose at the ballots. That's the only time they'll ever.
That's not true. That's not true.
When they win. The entire Democratic Party shifted in the 80s because they lost tremendously to Reagan.
They should have shifted after the last election, and then look at what they did. All they had to do was put up a normal candidate, not act crazy, not put a bunch of crazy socialist policies together. But look what they did. Look where we're at. They did not learn. Nobody
multiple cycles for any political party to get to understand what's going to pivot that. It happens.
And I think the most telling number, the most telling number in all of this is honestly the fact that in pulling up the numbers really quick, I mean, Florida has 2,000 deaths total throughout the entire state. When you pull up, New York Times actually put out an article today about how a third of all the deaths nationwide have been at nursing homes. New York is at number one, with 20% of all of the state's deaths coming from nursing homes, with 5,403 deaths. I mean, that's more than twice the number of deaths that there have been in Florida. And so at some point, you got to say, this is failed leadership. Even if we don't have a city as dense as New York, okay? The fact that you have more than twice the number of people who died in nursing homes compared to the entire population of a state with similar of similar size is a complete and utter lack of or failure of leadership, and how he's not thrown out of office after all this.
And again, and that's kind of what goes back to what we were talking about a little bit last week, was let's go back after this is all done and evaluate who did it right and who did it wrong. So why did Italy have such a crazy spike in numbers? They're going back to normal sometime this week. And people are gonna have to answer for, like, what happened there? Like, why was it so bad there? Same thing with New York. Why was it so bad there? And again, like you said, it's going to come back down to leadership at the end of the day and policy.
And you can't even use the density as that much of an argument. For the longest time, of the 5 boroughs in New York City, Staten Island had the most deaths and per capita, and it's the lowest densely populated part of New York City. I think Brooklyn now took it over, but for almost the entire run, it was Staten Island. So even the density conversation is not that much. In LA, only 6 people have died from actual coronavirus. Everyone else that has passed away was because of pre-existing conditions. And so that is the larger conversation. And in Los Angeles, they want to close for another 3 months. The revolt that's happening, and we are going to take so many more districts back in California because of the sheer revolt. They had a special election there that we blew it up by 20 points. And so that's what's happening around the country. People are seeing the example of what's happening in California and New York and Illinois and even Wisconsin, where the Supreme Court had to get involved in it. And that's the beauty of our government, that we have a third branch of the judicial that is able to push back and restore rights. Because how dare any mayor of any city say that if you wear a face mask, you can get some of your rights back? That is a slap in the face. And they're already talking about having him recalled. I think his name is, Eric Garcetti?
I don't know.
Yeah, so they're trying to recall him now because people are upset. And let them be upset. People have to get mad and see that their rights are being violated, so they're able to fight back.
This is going to be a huge turning point politically, as we saw with 9/11, as we've seen with other major crises in this country, where politically it has shifted. And I think we are going to see major changes. We're obviously going to talk about California and what's happening over there coming up soon. But when you talk about people who are centrists, or are capitalists at heart and maybe more liberal in terms of social issues, say, you know what, this has gotten ridiculous. When you hear a Joe Rogan, who is absolutely moderate, he's definitely, libertarian on issues, very social on other issues, say, you know what, for my livelihood and the livelihood of my family, I may have to leave California. He's not the only one thinking it. Going back to the New York Times, they put a map out of where everybody that is leaving New York is going to, and one of the main destinations is Florida. Primarily South Florida, which they don't need any more people than we do.
From New York,
more liberals and right from New York.
No, let them stay there. Let them stay in South Florida. Do not pollute the rest of the North.
We still need a wall around Florida at some point. But the because since we've already started talking about it, Johnny, the California and turning red, you've now watched two different districts there that were historically had some Republican influence there, but were not turned red for about a decade now. And you're seeing Mike Garcia, I believe his name is, in District 3, right. And he was able to take that election, a special election, from somebody else, Democratic stronghold. It does tell you where everybody's mindset is right now, and they're seeing that given too much power, there's too much regulation, there's too many rules, and doesn't make sense. And people at some level are able to have common sense. If you go to the average person in California, they're normal people. I know that we like to make fun of them a lot on this show and make fun of them a lot from Florida, but your average Californian is a pretty normal person, right? Like they just like the beach a little bit too, the same way we do. It's a little bit relaxed, but at the end of the day, they still need business to thrive, and they still need all of the basic rights that everybody else does in America. And that's why you end up seeing these great displays of patriotism, people driving Jeeps up and down the beach now protesting these ridiculous rules that they have over there, because the people in power in California are the problem. It's your elitist, Hollywood type that is sitting up there and saying, oh, guys, we need to shut everything down. We can't, one life is too many, and all those different types of talking points, because that's what's bred in LA. And it's not representative of the entire state of California, which I think has a lot more patriots in it than we give them credit for.
Chris, go ahead.
So I will disagree with you, Anibal and Jonny, a little bit as far as the whole density thing goes. I think density is a factor, but density coupled with the lifestyle of the Northeast, of New England, the public transit that everyone uses because they just have too many cars for it to be practical. LA has 16-lane freeways, so they're traveling more individually. So that's a big factor in spread. So I will give some credit to New York in that aspect. But as far as learning a lesson going forward, in childhood, we learn lessons by feeling pain. You put your hand on a hot stove, you get hurt, and that you learn from that. That's a valuable lesson. But the entire time we've had all this cash flow, all these Band-Aids, this painkiller that's kept us from learning a lesson. And that lesson's not going to be felt until that painkiller wears off, and that's when those notes come due. All of this debt becomes called in. Our taxes have to go up to balance the budget. This is it's going to be felt at some point, but I feel like the next round of COVID in October or November or the spring, the coming spring, we won't have felt those lessons yet. So this lesson will have not been learned for maybe another 5 or 10 years. hopefully sooner if people wake up.
Chris, to that point, real quick, the amount of money that we're thinking about spending with another $3 trillion bill would put us at, I think, close to like 30 trillion or so in debt. If we take basic interest levels and calculate that out, we would be paying about a third, like about 28 to 30% of the American spending is going to go to interest payments. Like, let's think about that for a little bit. Like, it's insanity. And again, like you said, no one's going to really feel it right now because it's numb. Nobody else is footing the bill, but eventually someone's going to have to foot that bill. We're going to do something about it. But most people think of it, it's so astronomical, people can't even wrap their heads around it, and they're not going to feel it for a long time, but it's eventually going to come crashing down.
The states are going to feel it, if anything, when it comes to the bills that they're going to have to pay for. The federal government is never going to have to feel it whatsoever because the monetary policy that we control as the United States and govern around the entire world will not allow that to happen. So it's not like the U.S. is ever going to be out of the basket of currency. That's never going to happen. We are the world currency with almost 90% of all international trade done in U.S. dollars. But I do agree with Chris and Jake when it comes to the states having to pay that bill back. And that's something that is going to hit back harder for them. It's already happened in cities. We will see probably a state in the future having to be, which is going to go into default. I would see that first before anything else.
Well, economic ignorance and fear makes it easy to govern this way. That's why Democrats are so successful. If they didn't have this ability to govern this way, they wouldn't exist as a party. But the last point I have as far as learning our lesson, if we look at what the media is doing, here in Tampa Bay, we have a Tampa Bay Times newspaper that the way they're reporting, the methods they're suggesting that are catching on within half of their readership or half of our county here, the fear is still there. We've learned so much, and we've had so much data to suggest that, masks aren't necessarily the be-all, end-all, or that the solution is not going to be coming for another 12 months. So the media's portrayal of how this is going out and that we're still failing is going to result in the same actions being taken in the next couple of waves. I mean, I can't see a way around that because of people's mindsets about how this still exists. There's people that still think that if you get it, you're going to die if you're 40 years old and healthy. Like, that's a serious factor. I mean, what do you guys think about that?
I don't see another shutdown of national proportion happening again. I think it'll happen within pockets when there's a flare-up, which is perfectly fine. But I do not see another national shutdown whatsoever in the fall or the spring. It won't.
Well, and Anibal, there never was a national shutdown to let everybody kind of get that through their head. There's been guidelines. There's been, suggestions on how we socially distance, but it's been entirely left up to the states to decide. And so there has been statewide shutdowns, but there's been very little national policy other than international flights and things like that has gone towards, from a national standpoint.
And it was a rolling shutdown when you look at it, the pressure that state governors were having, and some of them, kudos to them, that did not fall on their swords during the first initial panic and the hype of what was happening in
But that was Jake's point.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I don't think it's gonna happen again if there is, and I think there might be a second wave. But even if there is or it's not, I don't think there's gonna be the rampant shutdown that we experienced the last 2 months.
Yeah, I mean, what Jake was getting at was that there was no federal directive as to shutting anything in particular down. There were obviously the threat of, and the president was going to limit immigration from certain countries, or he was going to limit immigration, or air travel, in its entirety, to a certain extent. But none of that ever came to fruition because I think they saw that, okay, if we let the states kind of handle this on their own, then you can obviously kind of fine tune and just be supportive in terms of finances, in terms of supplies, where it's needed. But where I think this is going to have the biggest impact on this country politically is that this has really put a huge hole in the liberal agenda on multiple levels. I mean, we're looking at the fact that business owners are realizing that, when you talk about universal basic income, there are people now who don't want to go back to work. because
a real
they're getting
problem.
more money,
Yeah.
and I know that's one of our back burner topics that we haven't gotten to yet. But then you're also looking at mass transit. Okay. Obviously here in Florida, people have been trying to make the case for more mass transit and light rail and other types of mass transit systems. This completely puts a hole in that, because nobody's going to want to come anywhere near a mass transit project.
You would think, Johnny, but everyone's still pushing for it. That's the problem, though, is that, like when it goes back to what I was saying about learning our lessons, is that it should put holes in a lot of those theories. It should make you rethink your entire philosophy, right? Like if you really sit there and you're still far left after this whole thing, I don't know what reality you're living in, but I still see it on my Facebook page. I see my friends that are on that side, and they're saying, we just need more government. If we had a bigger government, then it would be better. If we had more regulation, it would be better. If we had a better, regulated government healthcare, it'd be better. If we had universal basic income, it'd be better. All of these things, Greta Thunberg is going on CNN after her note about how she's saying that we can't possibly go back to the normal because normal wasn't working. I mean, that's the ideology that you're fighting against here. And so while you think that everyone's going to be rational and say, okay, well maybe our policies don't make any sense, Johnny, I don't see it happening, because it's not happening.
Well, no, but I'm saying, again, I think anyone with common sense and logic is going to be able to look at that and say, okay, this obviously isn't going to work in this type of new normal, right? Because even when you boil it down to something as ridiculous as the St. Petersburg ban on plastic straws, okay, I'm telling you right now, even myself, who isn't really all that worried about catching this virus, I'm still not going to use a glass that somebody else used without a disposable plastic straw. And you're going to see a lot more use, especially right now with delivery. You order anything, what do you got? You got single-use plastics. All right, you got styrofoam, you got all this disposable stuff, because that's all going to help minimize, any type of transmission in this type of scenario. And from an environmental standpoint, again, this puts huge holes in the liberal agenda. Not that that's going to stop them. I'm just saying that now those arguments are made.
But this is what you're willing to tolerate now. We are 70 days from when this officially started. What's going to look like 3 months from now, even after summer? It's going to be a completely different world. And when I say that, I mean that people are going to be willing to take risks and be able to do more and more things. Concerts will reopen, sporting events will reopen. And that's why I get so frustrated when people are trying to plan for November and December, thinking that we're going to be living the same way we are now, which is not true at all.
I got my flight to the Caribbean already booked.
Oh yeah, so do I. So do I. And that's the point that I think a lot of people need to start understanding, is that only less than 30 days ago, you wouldn't even fathom going out and going into a restaurant in general public. Now you see more people more than willing to do that. And again, it's because I always go by this. The original purpose of this lockdown was to flatten the curve and to give hospitals and organizations time to build up their capacity to allow for us not to overwhelm the healthcare. Yeah. That was the purpose, and Americans were willing to do it because they saw that there was a purpose and an end game, and to help their fellow American. Now you just see the power grab of what's happening in LA County and what's happening in other left states, that they don't want to give away the power. You give these people a little bit of power and it's like strong drink to their head, and they're not willing to give it up because they want to change what America is now. But yet you have all these college kids thinking about going back in the fall and realizing it's all going to be virtual, but there's no cut in their school fees. See, that's going to start pissing more and more people off when they realize that it's been a bunch of bullcrap, and the value of what's happened, what we valued in the past to what we value in come September, will be completely different.
Well, guys, thank you again for coming on the show today. For those of you watching, we appreciate you. Thank you so much. Please make sure you share the show. Leave us a comment. Leave us a reaction. We appreciate you. And don't forget to sign up for the audio version of our podcast, now being updated weekly. And you can do that at Spotify, Google, or Apple podcast platforms, or even just search on Google for the Yard Sign, and it comes right up there. And so we've obviously been talking about the $3 trillion bailout, Cuomo's COVID policy, and now, unfortunately, one of the side effects of all this has been the cancellation of graduation ceremonies and commencement ceremonies. Now, this has obviously opened the window for people to take advantage of this kind of moment. And one of the people that has taken advantage of this to try to defend their legacy, or what little is left of it, is former President Obama, who has now taken it upon himself to attack the president, something that has also been typically unprecedented for a former president to attack a president that is in office. But being that now he's feeling the heat as some of these things come out about his administration, he's speaking out against the president. Do you think, guys, that, what is coming out, is going to fall just as hard on Joe Biden? Obviously, it's easy to connect those dots. Or do you think people are going to say, well, that's a problem for Obama to deal with? That has nothing to do with Joe Biden and his candidacy.
Former President Obama, you're in the dunce chair right now. Why are you talking smack about a president who is dealing with something of a magnitude you never dealt with in your presidency?
He had swine flu.
Okay, well,
it didn't go very well, by the way. Nobody cared about it.
Swine flu was a big deal, but no one did care about it. So so the points we made earlier, this is a government-made crisis. We can all agree on that. But anyway, the things that occurred under his nose regarding Michael Flynn and regarding the FBI and our three-letter agencies, for this to come out and you to be so snide to begin passing judgment on a president that's sitting right now dealing with the biggest crisis in history as far as I'm concerned, it's disgusting.
He's got to come back. And what's happening right now is exactly what you're talking about, though, is right. You have General Flynn being kind of exonerated in the public eye right now, and that looks really bad on Obama, and that looks really bad on Obama's DOJ. And when you start seeing that, he still has come out now and go, I need to do some damage control and kind of explain like what's going on here and give my opinion on it. And I think that what I want to talk about is that our listenership of Republicans, I think, are waiting for Obamagate to come down, and they've been waiting for a long time. That there's, I see the memes out there, I see the posts, everyone's like, oh, Obama's going to jail, Hillary's going to jail, all these people are going to jail, and like everyone's all excited for like all of these chips to fall, that William Barr is going to come and just lock up all of these Democrats. But I'm gonna burst your bubble right now, like fellow Republicans. It is not going to happen. I will tell you the same thing that I told my liberal friends, that there's no one's going to jail during any of this investigation. There's like none of those chips are going to fall the way you want them to fall. That's just not how this works. That's just not how, like, that. When is the last, even Nixon, go back to Nixon, he didn't go to jail. There have been it's just time after time again, those people that are at the top of power here, you saw it in 2008, no one went to jail. I mean, they're just not going to go to jail. I mean, should you be outraged about it? Should you be upset about it? Yeah, absolutely. But, temper your hopes and expectations, because I don't expect much to come of it.
Why are these gigantic crimes like Uranium One, all the things that have happened so far as the Russia probes, why does no one ever get in trouble for this kind of stuff at the top of government?
People do get in trouble. It's just that, again, what's been a blessing in this country is that we don't go after past presidents when it comes to taking them to jail. That will make a huge problem in a crisis if we start doing that as a nation. So I don't think Obama's going to prison. I don't think Hillary's going to go to prison unless like someone releases her hit list. I don't know what's going to happen there.
That still wouldn't do it.
Yeah, I don't think it'd do it either. And so it's never going to happen where the top of the tickets are ever going to go to jail, because our system is not designed that way. What I will say is that their legacies get tarred, and that's the crux of it. Obama was like the Karen of presidents, that she felt, that she felt that her stink didn't smell. And so every single time, he was the first president without a scandal. And I'm like, are you serious? Just wait. History always reveals how scandalous it was. And
Anibal, that's what the problem is, though, is that it's like when people say to themselves, there have been no scandals, it's because of the media's love obsession with that president and not holding his feet to the fire during any sort of scandal. And it's complete opposite with Trump. And so history is going to be remembered based off of who writes it. To quote William Barr and a couple other people this week, like, history is written by the winners. Well, it's also written by the media narrative and then the general feeling in the country, which is dictated by the media's projection of it. And for Obama, they're never going to say anything bad about him. They're still not saying anything bad about him. Something more and more terrible stuff can come out, but it's just, I think history will remember him as a good president and one without a scandal. because
I don't
that
think
is
it
what the
will.
media feeds. That's what the media
I
feeds
do
people.
not. Right now, you may think of that, but 5-10 years down the line, I do not think of that whatsoever. The breakdown of what's happening and what's being revealed by the Obamagate, by the general being revealed as he was what's the verbiage that they use, unmasked, is that people are starting to realize that the Obama administration, the last days of his presidency, were so passive aggressive of trying to tank an incoming president. People are so upset about that, and I hate using this algorithm that it was trending on Twitter, because I think it's stupid when people say Obamagate, #Obamagate was trending on Twitter, and people are talking about it more. It just takes time. It takes journalists to actually do their job, and it just takes time for these things to come out. We've always known that he's been a corrupt president, that he always thought that he was better than everyone else around him. He did nothing for the Black community, he did nothing for other minorities, but yet they still praise him because of, I have no idea. When he was on the lecture that he was talking about making comments, and it wasn't even direct comments to the president, it was all backhanded comments, that makes him look even more weak, because he cannot name the person out. If you're going to talk about Trump, then talk about him, because you know what's going to happen? Trump is going to talk about you to your face. You cannot do that, Karen, to President Trump. He's going to hit you back, and hit you back even harder. And people don't realize that this was broadcast by JP Morgan, show me your walk and all that bull crap that's happening out there. And it was other CEOs, and it was hosted by Kevin Hart. I didn't watch it. I only watched the highlights. But it's these.
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. It's where the clip comes from, of where Obama was talking about it. He was vague about who he was talking to, but he was very on point of talking about his YouTube channel and his deal with Netflix and all the multi-million-dollar deal he's getting there. And now I wish we had more of Carter, if anything, someone that still, he did his job, he was president, and then he went back teaching Sunday school. Because that's what you do that's what you did as president. You did your job and then you left. And now that Obama's coming back, he'll have even more egg on his face when Joe Biden loses in November.
Well, one of the things that I believe I mentioned off air just before we got started is the fact that this Obamagate thing is going to be what is reminiscent of his administration, because every other policy, every other milestone that he thinks he achieved throughout his administration has fortunately been undone by this administration, leaving there really nothing left behind, nothing for them to admire.
Healthcare hasn't been attacked yet. That's the only thing. I think that when you think about Obama, that's his kind of his flagship, policy, and we actually still have that, and
they undid the worst parts of it. They undid the worst parts of it. Which was the tax mandate. Because at the end of the day, that's all it really was. It was a money grab. And in fact, if anybody was in the pockets of these healthcare corporations, these insurance companies, it was Obamacare, and it was that administration, because all that money and all that just ensured that they were basically too big to fail. And so you're right, from the sense that we still have Obamacare in some capacity, but the mandate and all the legal obligations that came with it, thanks to the IRS, I mean, those had pretty much vanquished, in the first year or two of this administration. And so, I think he's doing more harm than good. I mean, nothing gets the Republicans fired up more than President Obama. And so for him to resurface at this time, especially when Joe Biden's MIA, I think it's only going to leave even your most ardent Democrats saying, "Man, it's like, I can't believe we couldn't put up a decent candidate for this election."
Oh, they already feel that way.
Yeah, exactly. And with the pushback that they are getting from the governors and the mayors in their respective cities and states on all this lockdown nonsense, I think it's only going to push people further to the right, because they're going to realize that there was only really one party fighting for freedom in all this, and that's freedom of business, freedom of movement, freedom of personal rights and civil rights.
And we just recruited Elon. We just recruited Elon Musk, and so everyone else needs to just come on along, take the red pill, listen to his advice, listen to this show, listen to what we're saying, because we're not crazy. We're not what the media wants you to think we are. And if you actually, sit down and listen to the Republican Party, there's probably a lot of really reasonable people, especially the younger ones.
Yeah, and it's not like we're pushing people to become Republicans. I think the best I heard from a Joe Rogan perspective was maybe California should turn purple. And I agree with that. I think with that kind of, if people get so upset, they're going to want to vote for someone else. Now, again, in West Coast and up north, it's difficult to get people to vote for Republicans. But if you tell them that they can vote for something different, then that takes more votes away from the Democratic Party and allows the Republicans to be able to move forward. And it's a numbers game. This whole thing is a numbers game. We're picking up more young people, more minorities, more suburban moms, which is the craziest thing. But we are losing those that are 65 and older when it comes to the Republican Party, which is
how do you not look at the overspending by California, at their high-speed train to nowhere, at the fact that their homeless numbers are through the roof, the fact that they're literally taking tax dollars to give alcoholics and drug addicts more of their vices. In these kind of situations, it's where people reveal themselves the most. And I think liberals have revealed themselves for what their agenda truly is, and the fact that they don't know how to manage their states and cities in a crisis like this.
California was red once. I think California will become red again, with the pockets of blue. But I think this coming election cycle is a perfect timing. And again, this might be the best scenario for it to have to really show the tyrannical aspect of their governors and mayors and show that a change is needed.
All right, guys. Well, again, thank you so much for your insight. And I'm sure we'll have another great list of topics for next week's show. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and do our closing topics. Jake, kick us off.
So my final words are going to be to get out and go enjoy life, because what you don't want to do is sit around and waste all of the time. Life is short. It really is. And you need to look at it and think to yourself, man, did I just waste 3 months sitting inside refreshing fake statistics? No? Okay, well, let go. And you don't want to do that the next 3 months. You don't want to live in fear. Look, take reasonable precautions. There are a lot of things that I don't consider to even matter. The masks, I am wandering around without masks on because I inherently will take on this risk of a virus with a 99.8% survival rate. I'm okay. I will go out and be a risk taker. Live your life. There are dangers out there. That is it. But please get back to what you're doing. If you're a small business owner, I wish you the best of luck at getting back as we go through phase 1 and phase 2. If you're, not a business owner, but, maybe somebody has been kind of cooped up, I hope that you getting more and more confident to go out and cause the world is safe out there, safe enough that you can at least move around.
All right, Chris Verkuilen, closing thoughts.
So excellent points, Jake. Really, you took the words out of my mouth. But as far as California turning red, as far as that whole last topic we were talking about, I hope that this leads to us winning the popular vote in the Electoral College this year. I think that'd be the best slap in the face to everyone who has misbehaved in government over the course of the last 2 months. And if I can say anything to people who are taking the red pill, please, when you either vote red or if you move to somewhere that is red, don't take your blue policies with you. Remember why you left that place, and remember that you don't want to take that place and turn it into the hellhole you came from. That's all I have. Thank you.
All right, Anibal, bring us home.
I'm an international guy. I am
DJ Decab.
Okay, I do worry of how the world is going to look in the next 6 months to a year.
Yep.
The reason why I say that is because this coronavirus has caused one thing and one thing only: the quickening of what was going to happen with U.S. pulling out of a lot of trade negotiations and pulling out of almost entire global security situations, and what the ramifications of that looks like when it comes to China, when it comes to Pakistan, when it comes to Brazil, is going to be fascinating. And the problem with it is that the U.S. doesn't care anymore. And so I am very excited to see what the world looks like in 6 months now that the U.S. is bringing everything back in, and the reindustrialization of the U.S. is going to be fascinating and will be beneficial to the U.S. people, but will be detrimental to the world.
All right. Thank you so much. And actually, kind of on a similar note, I wanted to close saying that one of the points I wanted to make during our conversation about the bailout and, the federal deficit and all of this is that, honestly, what's keeping this country together financially or fiscally is the fact that right now, China was kind of our biggest threat. And honestly, with the backlash that they are definitely going to get because of this coronavirus from a manufacturing standpoint, I think that's going to be a power vacuum away from China. And really the only way for us to get out of this deficit hole is for us to really take ownership of making products again, and not being just a consumer nation, but also a productive nation as well, from a manufacturing standpoint. And so
It's starting.
hopefully that's,
It's definitely
I
starting.
agree. I mean, when you see companies as big as Apple, pull more and more out of China, I think that's a clear sign that whatever's happening in China is not working for these big corporations in the way that they thought it would. And the backlash, I think, from Americans on foreign-made products, specifically coming from China, I think is going to be very loud and very real. So
It's starting
thanks
to
again.
look like.
Oh,
I want to say that it's starting to look like China is kind of doing this on purpose. In the last 2 months, it has destroyed and burned 3 decades of international negotiations and dialogue and diplomacy. So to see how that country is going to reintegrate itself into the world is almost impossible. And they have a demographic problem, they have a consumer problem. They do not have any of the strengths to let them become a first world nation. And it's going to be sad to see the ramifications of their decisions as their leadership.
Oh, they're in a huge panic. I mean, their PR machine couldn't be working any harder right now. And unfortunately, we have a media that's going to appease them. And so you're going to have your NBCs and your CBSs continue to push out, the Chinese government's narrative, because
the NBA.
Yeah.
The NBA
but
is
not
insane.
this media. Not this media. We do not do that. So tune into the Yard Sign every week for real news.
That's right. On behalf of Chris Verkuilen, Anibal, Cabrera, and Jake Hoffman, I'm Jonny Torres. Thank you so much for watching The Yard Sign. Again, please share this episode and make sure to subscribe to the audio version of our podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Google platforms. Until next time, don't forget to like and share. We appreciate you watching. This has been another episode of The Yard Sign. Say goodbye, fellas.
Adios.